Democrats aren't interfering in the 2024 election with this Trump trial. They're blatantly rigging it. That would be the 2024 election. And that would be the headline in the Federalist today from John Daniel Davidson, a senior editor there. He's our next guest. John, great to have you with us, sir.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Just give me the rundown here. We obviously got some news yesterday on what's going to happen beginning next year in early March. Trump has to go to trial now, and it just so happens that March 4th date is the day before Super Tuesday. What's going on?
What a coincidence. Can you imagine it? Man, this federal judge picked March 4th as the day to start Trump's bogus trial, this sort of show trial. This is the one that's related to January 6th charges that Trump engaged in some sort of seditious conspiracy by telling people to peacefully protest at the U.S. Capitol on January 6th, brought by special counsel Jack Smith. Now, I argue that it's no accident that they chose March 4th, the day before Super Tuesday, not just to harm Trump's chances in the election and hurt his campaign and distract him, but also to set up a scenario whereby if Trump wins the primary, if he becomes the GOP nominee, he'll be convicted over the summer, most likely by a D.C. jury, a district that went 92% for Joe Biden. Of course, any jury in D.C. is going to convict Trump on any charges. And that will set blue states and counties and municipalities up to use this 14th Amendment argument to strike Trump from the ballot, throwing the election into chaos just months before Election Day.
Yes, and that seems to be the point. March 4th is the one that they really want because Fani Willis also wants that to be the beginning of her trial in Georgia. Everybody wants March 4th. It's very interesting they want that date in particular.
It's a big day. It's a big day, March 4th. I guess prosecutors think it's a good omen to have their trial start on March 4th, and biased, politically compromised judges, at least the federal judge in D.C., would seem to agree.
Yeah, and I was saying yesterday, and I've been saying, that you'd have to be a moron not to recognize the timing here. They keep alleging that this all occurred either in late 2020 or early 2021, the substance, to the extent that you can call it that, of any of the allegations here. And yet the indictments are being handed down now, and the trials are set to begin in the beginning of 2024. Who else would be subjected to this kind of timeline, if not a candidate for president of the United States who's being targeted by his political opponents?
And only a Republican candidate, mind you. They would never dream of doing this to a Democrat. No, to your point, there's a whole bunch of January 6th defendants who have not had a trial date set yet, who have been rotting in federal prison for years now. But somehow Trump is going to get an 8-month fast-tracked trial that just so happens to coincide with the beginning of the 2024 election cycle, and we're all just supposed to pretend this is normal. The point is it's not normal, and Democrats are not even trying to hide it at this point. It's out. You're meant to notice, right? You're meant to notice that there's a two-tiered justice system and that Trump is being treated differently, and that the whole process is politicized.
Is there, in your view, John Daniel Davidson, is there a correlation between this and how poorly Biden's presidency has been going? Is the intensity of their effort to try and smear Trump related to Biden's failures?
I think it helps to distract the public from the massive failures, sort of one after another, of the Biden administration. But it's also just a naked exercise in power.
Yes.
The left has taken control of every major institution in this country, including the Department of Justice, including much of the federal judiciary. And this is an exercise in demonstrating the power that they have over the political process. And that's why I say that we are meant to notice. It's not just about Trump. It's about sending a message to all Americans that if you commit the crime that Trump committed, which the real crime Trump committed was winning in 2016. If you commit that crime, in other words, if you go against the establishment, if you try to dismantle the permanent regime in Washington, D.C., then you will become a target, and your erstwhile First Amendment and other constitutional protections will become criminalized, and you'll end up in court just like Trump.
And they have a hyperventilating left-wing media that's also captured by the left.
Yeah,
that is breathing life into every little granular update in this saga and making it seem like it's the biggest scandal our country's ever faced.
And pretending that it's legitimate. I think it's a pointless exercise in doing a legal analysis of the charges and digging into the laws that federal prosecutors say Trump violated. It's ridiculous when you actually look at it. This is First Amendment protected free speech that Trump was engaging in, legal efforts to challenge election results in a handful of states that had really close and sometimes really shady elections in 2020. And there is no point in pretending, like the mainstream corporate media does, that these are legitimate charges. These are not. This is a show trial. It's commie nonsense.
Okay, so the answer on the right, by and large, now obviously Trump's answer is to say that he's being targeted, as you're pointing out, and as I've been pointing out, he's being targeted and persecuted, and he's always been saying they're trying to, I'm only standing in the way. They're really coming after you, and boy, there's a lot of evidence for that too. But everyone else besides Trump, the guy who's being targeted here. The right seems to just kind of be making the defense like, well, no, he isn't guilty of this, and it's First Amendment protected speech, and stop hassling him. But it seems to me that it may be worth going on a little bit more offense here with these prosecutors and say, look, what's going to happen here is we're going to either use the power we have or we're going to accrue this power, and we are going after you for breaking the law, for violating the public trust, for misusing your positions in power to hurt someone and trample on their constitutional rights. Is there an appetite for this?
Well, there better be. Otherwise, the republic is finished. Look, what the left has done to these institutions and the way it has accrued power and has gone about wielding that power in a tyrannical way, it has to be stopped. They're not going to stop on their own. So until Republicans, attorneys general get the appetite in red states to indict Merrick Garland, to indict President Biden, to indict, Mayorkas, the Secretary of Homeland Security. Until we start sort of doing to them what they do to us, they won't stop. We have to impose a cost on them.
Yes.
But as you say, just arguing on Twitter or whatever, like, oh, but Trump didn't do anything wrong, that's not going to cut it.
Right.
You have to make them feel pain.
But the one distinction I will make, though, is that this is not low. This is not frivolous. Like, actually going after these people for violating the public trust, violating laws, trampling constitutional rights is a legitimate exercise in power rather than what the left is doing. I often hear people on the right say, well, the right should be doing exactly what the left is doing. Not quite. The left is being deceitful in its pursuits. The right should still be honest.
I agree. I agree that there's more, definitely a legitimate cause to bring charges and to bring for House Republicans to bring an impeachment inquiry forward for not just for members of the cabinet, but for President Biden. And if they don't do that, if they balk at the last minute, then it's over. Then the game's up. Then Democrats know that the power that Republicans have at their disposal will never actually be used. And so there's nothing to restrain the left. There's nothing to stop Democrats from pushing forward.
I mean, conventionally in Washington, what typically happens is Republicans will try and throw out some red meat to sort of calm the base down, and then they won't, and then kind of give the appearance of action. And if an impeachment proceeding in particular is going to ever get started, normally they wouldn't want to delay it. Like, they wouldn't want to start it getting closer to the general election because they're concerned this will blow up in their faces and could result in Biden getting another term in office. So my view is if they're going to do it and if that's their concern, they should get started right now, no?
No, that's absolutely right. They needed to get started a couple months ago, but they actually absolutely have to get started now as we move out of summer into the fall. They need to get this underway. There's mountains of more evidence that Joe Biden engaged in criminal conspiracies and corrupt bribery schemes with foreign nationals than there ever was that Trump did anything wrong while he was in office, for which, the Democrats didn't hesitate to impeach him for a phone call, inquiring about the very thing that we now know was happening, that Biden was taking bribes from Ukraine.
So again, you're emphasizing today that there is quite obviously a Democratic effort to rig the next election underway. And it seems to me that it's multifaceted. There's a lot of elements to it because there's a lot of institutions involved, whether it's the media and its credulity towards certain storylines, its willingness to suppress others, a la Hunter Biden, the trying to get Trump taken off the ballot to rob voters of the ability to even render a judgment. That's talk about anti-democratic.
Right.
And the other piece is my suspicion has been one of the things the Democrats are doing right now is they're smearing Trump, and they're so obviously persecuting him that it makes it much more likely that he will be the nominee because Republicans will rally to his defense, as we've seen happen. And they are of the opinion that whatever they did in 2020 by propping up a guy who barely can walk upstairs, they think they can do it again against Trump because they have some evidence in the past. Do you think that's right?
I think that's a fair analysis. Watch out for those resurgent COVID restrictions, lockdowns, masks, extraordinary polling rules ahead of the primary and the general election season. We're going to see COVID come back in a big way because it worked for the Democrats last time to use that as a pretext to change how we do our elections. And I would not be surprised in the least if they try to do it again.
Do you detect that people are waking up to this at all? I saw quite a bit of reaction to Trump's arrest and mugshot this past week in Georgia. A lot of social media sharing of, in particular, Black Americans rallying to Trump's defense. I don't know if that's indicative of a broader trend, but do you think Americans are waking up to some of this?
I think that a lot of Americans are noticing the double standard of justice that we have in this country, one for Democrats and one for Republicans, and especially a separate one for Trump. And I think that resonates with Americans who have had dealings with the justice system and who do feel that it's kind of a two-tiered system and it's not, people aren't always treated fairly or equally. And so, yeah, I'm not surprised at all to see people responding and maybe, sort of coming around to see some of the things that some of us have been decrying for a long time. Something like a mugshot is really a visceral, visual example of pervasive rot in our justice system. And I think that will ultimately redound electorally to Trump's advantage. Now, whether or not, that only matters to the extent that we have a free and fair election, which is very much in question.
Yeah, that has to happen. And then finally, I'm looking at, it wasn't just Trump that's being targeted. It's certainly in all of these prosecutions, a lot of officials and people who've been close to Trump or around him or have ever supported him are being targeted. Among those is a person called Harrison Floyd. He was the leader of Black Voices for Trump. And this past Friday, he is the only person who was denied bail and is now sitting in jail. He's one of the 18 co-defendants alongside former President Trump. And Breitbart News rightly points out that Fulton County is holding him as a political prisoner right now as we mark the 60th anniversary of Martin Luther King's March on Washington. Martin Luther King also famously once held in that Fulton County jail. And once again, Democrats have turned a black man into a political prisoner in 2023.
I think that's a fair analysis. It's a fair statement. How else can you parse it? This is the crimes, quote unquote, these people are accused of are political speech. These are questions that are decided in this country or used to be decided by politics, not by the criminal justice system. And you can't just decide that because some people disagree with you or they disagree with the entire corporate media that they've somehow now committed a crime. That's absurd. It's not, we talk about how, that's Banana Republic nonsense. It's not Banana Republic nonsense. It's communist dictator nonsense. This is the kind of stuff that the Soviet Union did. This is the kind of stuff that still goes on in communist countries like China. And it's happening here right underneath our noses. And as I say, the Democrats aren't even trying to hide it.
And in all of those regimes, they always have, dutiful little lickspittles who justify all of it. And we see that in the media constantly.
Yep.
John Daniel Davidson, thank you very much for keeping your eyes open and for sharing your thoughts with us today, sir.